is. How's everybody doing? Are you in the... I think I'm better. Yeah. I slept 7 hours last night. And that never happens. And so, yeah, that's a great thing, man. All right. What's that? I am, yeah. All right. So, are you tracking some of the stuff that we're talking about here? I want to just take a moment and do just a very brief review of what I've said so far, because I want us to, kind of travel together, and then I'll stop and take questions or even comments where you can sharpen what I'm talking about. Some of you did yesterday, and it helped me beautifully, and I want that to continue. So I'm trying to balance two things. I'm trying to balance, the absorption rate that we actually present it fast enough so you can take it without having to stay too long in one place, and at the same time, I'm trying to create a discussion and things. So please be patient. Okay. Here's what I said so far yesterday, that there's another model of leadership out there that is needed not only in the church, I think especially in the church, but also in other organizations as well. And the beautiful thing of it is that it's not something that just trained ministers can do, because if you're not formally trained in ministry, you should know that ministers are not trained this way either. So this is actually all new for all of us when we see it. But what we said was that there's a call to be a shepherd as well as a call to be a leader, and that these are not necessarily the same thing. And the market today is driving us to be leaders. But I think what people are craving in the world today is someone who will shepherd them, not just lead them. I think people are getting kind of weary of being led by visions instead of by people who know them. And so what we said was that there were 4 marks that, or like traits that shepherds exhibited. And the first one is that they know their sheep, then that they feed their sheep. My sheep hear my voice, and they know and they follow me. And then that he leads them in and leads them out, and they find rich pasture. These are all from John chapter 10. Shepherds then lead their sheep, and after he has led them out, he goes on ahead of them, and they follow him because they know his voice. And then shepherds protect their sheep in those seasons where they are being attacked. When the wolf attacked, the hired hand runs away, but the shepherd stays back and protects his sheep. Now, these are not 4 traits that occur on a list. They're actually, I said, more like a 4-legged stool, so that if you were to take one of these traits out of a shepherd's ability, the whole thing becomes tipsy. It becomes unstable. It's now fragile. So it's essential that as shepherds over people, we have to practice all 4 of these to some level of competency. Now, you and I are probably born or called or created, hang on just a second, with a strength or a natural aptitude to do one of these 4 things naturally, which means because some of them seem kind of opposite corners, if you're really strong at one of these naturally, then another one is probably more of a discipline for you. So I told you yesterday that by the way I was wired or built, made by God, it's easier for me to feed people than it is necessarily to know people. Because, introverts are really good at having deep thoughts, but they're just as content to have them with 3 people. So for me, this is natural, but I need to create disciplines to put me in rooms with other people so I can love and engage. And I'm having by the way, some marvelous conversations here that I'm really enjoying. I'm not forcing myself at all. I'm actually liking these things. And it's just because of the way God is teaching me to grow in an area that naturally is foreign to me, okay? So all we're saying is you'll have one of these 4 ways that you'll get into the art of shepherding, but once you get into it, you have to develop the other ones too. You can't just say, well, the way that I shepherd people is I lead them. I tell them where they should go. But if you don't actually know the people you're leading and you're not actually adding value to those people, and if they don't feel protected in their most vulnerable moments, then you think you're the leader, but you're not really the leader because they're not following you. See what I mean? So we have to develop in these other 4 things as well. So then the question became, how do we identify the people that we're going to shepherd? And what we learned yesterday was you can shepherd, and it's actually both. You can shepherd more people, some, or you can shepherd some people more. And if you're over organizations, you'll actually you don't have to choose, but you will do both of those things. So in my organization, there's 1,500 people in my church, and then there will be more in the fall when the students come back. So I can shepherd to some degree a lot of people, not 1,500 because I can't know them, but I can probably shepherd 300 or 400 people to a little bit of a degree because I know them somewhat, but I won't have a long-lasting effect on their lives. I can only do that with a few. So I'm going to try to shepherd more people some, but I'm also going to narrow my focus so I'm shepherding some people more. I'm going to get more and more intense. So if I were to summarize it, I would simply say something like this. I would say that my influence over, my influence is commensurate to the intensity with which I practice these 4 things. I'll pause for a second, then I'm going to come to your question, okay? Because these 4 things are never yes, no. They're always plus minus. The question is never, do you know people or not? The question is, how well? Do you feed them or not? No, of course you feed them, but what and how well? So the more intense I become in each one of these 4 things, the more influential my ministry will be over those people or with those people over a long period of time. So I can have a little bit of influence over 400 people in my church, but I will not have a great degree of influence over them, only the ones that I, with more intensity, practice these 4 things. I'll breathe for a second. That felt good. Let's go to your question. Shoot. Here it is, right there. Yep, go. Does it not work? Are you trying to record these questions too?
Hello? Hello.
Oh, there you go. All right.
Sorry.
Yep.
I'm trying to define the people groups, the 3 to 12. Like discipleship is obviously believer to believer. Are these people groups of 3 to 12 contain both unbelievers and believers?
Yes, and they're not necessarily people groups. You can do,
Well, I meant like define believer, unbeliever, family member, non-family member.
Yep, it's all
It's
of
just
those.
it's not, this isn't a discipleship class where
Nope.
you're raising up disciples. This is a class that is showing you a model in how to hopefully influence people, hopefully lead people to the Lord through this method.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. There's a couple things. Your questions kind of triggering some other things that are lying latent in my mind, like trash on the floor. And maybe I'll pick some of the things up and say, let me point. So if I decide, well, first, the way that I pick mine is I start with my family. Okay, I have a call right now to shepherd not only my wife, who also shepherds me, but my kids at different seasons of their life. So they're on my list right to start with. Then after that, I start looking around for people on my staff. Now we got about 30 staff. I can't shepherd them all. I can't even shepherd all of the ministers. I could have like, I don't know, 12, 11, 12 of those, or 50. I don't know how many there are. But that's too many too. And so what I try to do is to try to say, based on what season that they are in their life right now and some other things, which I'll give you in a second, is this a good time for me to shepherd them or not? And if it is, then I'll put them on the list as well. Then what I tend to do is I try to keep one or two slots at the end of the list to say, who are people that I naturally, Steve, would not shepherd? If you let me, I'd say, no, I'm not interested. But there is this thing from God where he says, you need to take this person up right now. Not forever, but I want you to take them up right now. So there's kind of a blank, at the end of that. That's kind of like a wild card for me, okay? Now, I meet with them one-on-one. They're never all in the room together. Well, the staff are, but that's not when it's happening. It's more at lunches and breakfasts and can I come into the office this time, those kind of things. Those people have more access to me than other people have. My office is in a different part because of the configuration of the church. So that, you can come anytime, call, texts, back and forth. So there's a different kind of a relationship there. That raises something else that I want to, if you were to take this on and say, I think I'm kind of interested in shepherding people. The other thing that I'm learning is there's different models of this that I'm learning from people that are actually shepherding me and people that I'm seeking their guidance from. And these are like in different degrees. So one of those models is, I'm just going to call it intensive. And when there's a more intensive model of shepherding going on, then you're meeting regularly, you have defined outcomes, you have scheduled practices or things that at the end of our meeting today, I'm going to go back and do, or you're going to do, and the next week when I see you again on Tuesday at 4 o'clock, you hear the structure going on here? Then we're going to kind of see how that's going, and there's usually a core curriculum. So this is pretty consistent, pretty intense. The upside is maximum influence. The downside is really hard to sustain this over a long period of time. So it needs a second, maybe more relaxed model, which I'm just calling occasional. And this is where most of mine, I think really all of the people who shepherd me are kind of in this category right now. In these, we meet as needed. And the curriculum is life. And the agenda is always brought by me. So like when I shepherd staff or students, I never say, yeah, I'd like to meet with you. Let's meet on Monday mornings, and we'll go through a book together. Far too structured for me. Listen, the rest of my life isn't like that. So why would I try to wear Saul's armor when it comes to shepherding? I got to find a style that fits me. So usually what I say is, if you're a student, I'll say, let's meet, say once a month, and you bring the agenda, okay? I'll be Papa Smurf. I'm just going to be the old man in the village that's seen enough stuff, so whatever you bring we'll talk about that. And it's in that talking through real life situations that the curriculum actually arises. Sometimes we'll be saying, have you read the book by Simon Sinek, Leaders Eat Last? And that seems like it would, or some other reference. Maybe you've see a TED Talk, go watch that. But it rises from a need that is in their life that they're bringing to me. It doesn't arise from some component that I'm trying to install in their life. I don't assume a deficiency. So which leads to the third one, which is, what is the third one? I put passive. It's passive. And all this is like what I am to the 300 or 400 in College Church. It means I don't meet with them. There is but the material is very well defined. It's the sermons and the teachings and the lessons that people come to. And the only thing that makes it shepherding is, to some degree, I know the situations in their lives. And when sermons or like classroom sessions are designed, they are designed to be directly focused on some of the things that I know about the people in my church. But beyond that, there's not a great level of intimacy, which means I'm starting to compromise influence. See it? Because these always go together. What you do to one, you do to the other. Exhale. Are you there? All right, let's take one more step. So then I'm asking myself, how do I find those people? And I've told you yesterday, I look for proximity, people that are already somewhere on my radar. I see them regularly in meetings. I look for pull. I already have some kind of gravitas. They already come to me for something, so I'm not trying to create an audience. They, to some degree, I already have an audience. And then I look for passion. Is God stirring my heart? In their book on mentoring, Paul Stanley and Robert Clinton do a really nice job of defining the kinds of people that you should think about taking on. Let me give you 4 criteria that kind of rise to the foreground to me. Once again, the question is, as a shepherd, who am I interested in? Passion is one of the components that decides who I invest more time with. So then how do I decide where my passion is? So one of those components is, does that person have potential? Do I see potential? And is it potential that other people don't see? Again, I have 600 college students in my church, and if you stepped into the room, you'd see the same potential that everybody else would see. Spend 6 months in my church, and you'd identify the same 10 or 12 students that all of the professors think are going to go well in the next 20 years. So I'm not that interested in them. They have enough leaders. I'm interested in the guy, or almost always the guy, but once in a while the gal, that no one else sees. There's some genius that he or she has that she doesn't even believe in yet because of any number of reasons, and I see it, and I think if it could just be released. So I'm looking for potential. Second, I'm looking for, are they teachable? Do they respond well when you give them advice? Do they get things done that you ask them to do? If they have teachability, that goes a lot. Now you're willing to put up with brashness and ignorance and stubbornness, all of these things, just because they're pliable and they're humble. Third, do they have ambition? Do they have enough ambition to sustain the quest that I believe they could be on. Now, this is extremely important because at some level of competence, all people appear to be the same. But as people become better and better in their field, they start quitting. They hit a certain place where good enough is good enough. I got my job, I'm doing my 40, got a pretty good salary, I got my boat, I got another cottage. No, I think this is good. And at least I'm just speaking for me, what I'm after is people that are hungry for something more than just the trappings. They're more interested in what they're going to do for God in this world than they are with what other people are thinking of them or how cool they are at the time. And so I'll spend a certain amount of time saying, does this person have ambition to drive them to the next level all of the time? They don't just stop. And then the last one for me is there an alliance between the thing that they're trying to be good at and the thing that I have mastered? Because now I'm talking about the resources that I have to draw from to actually shepherd this person. Can I actually add value to this person's life as they get better and better and better in it? Because if not, then they'll have to go find somebody else because they just outgrew their teacher. That makes sense? And if someone comes to me and says, I want you to, I wish I could spend time with you and whatever, but what I really want to be good at, Steve, is administration and organizing the church and things like that. I'm like, dude, no. No. Yeah.
And what if we see a need in someone and they're not aware of the need that they have?
If you see a need in someone that they're not aware of the need?
Yes, and they're not aware of the need that they actually have.
I think you can, now in your scenario, are you shepherding them formally or not?
Well, with the hopes of doing that.
Yeah, I think you can suggest it in questions form. I wouldn't, I'm not sure your style, sir, but mine is to not be that direct with people that I'm not very familiar with.
Well, it's a person, we're familiar with the person, just trying to come alongside. We see a need that's there, but that person's not, doing the things to take care of that need.
You're starting to talk like you're describing their teachability.
Well, I think they're teachable. They're that need that we see is just not on their radar.
Okay, yeah, but if you, all right, that helps. If you know them well, then I would address it straight on. Okay. I would say, I think you got tremendous potential, but you also have, there's an elephant sitting in your room.
Exactly, we know that.
Yep. Say what? Yeah, right. Yeah. This is a great point. This is a point where you actually have to lead. You have to actually push them into a place that they're probably not comfortable with because you have a vision bigger than they do. Yep. Other questions or comments before we turn the page here? Then. Yeah.
Are you, I don't want to get ahead of you, but are you going to comment? Some folks look at the gifts list in Ephesians 4:11 and talk about that as a kind of a leadership type of gifting. I just wondered where you're at on that, or if that's going to be addressed, or what.
Are you
Apostle,
talking about
prophet,
the
evangelist?
APEST?
Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I don't have that on my radar. Would you like to?
Well, I don't know that I want to comment on it. I just wondered, because we're talking about the shepherd.
Yeah,
Here. And in my experience with pastors, there are many that have that shepherding, that natural shepherding giftedness.
Yeah.
But it doesn't fit some of these other things that you're talking about. And then you get the apostle who just wants to run ahead of everybody. And I just didn't know if you were going to address that or not.
No, it's a really good question. I hadn't even made the connection, but you're right. Shepherd's one of those, of those 5 gift mixes. I think where I might be a little different is to think that while there are some who seem naturally gifted towards shepherding, my father, for instance, is one. I don't see it as much as a gifting, at least as I'll put it this, as I'm using the term there. I'm not seeing it as much as a gift as I am a calling. And so, since it's a calling, it means I'm willing to absorb certain things and sacrifice things and learn things, even if I'm not naturally talented at them, in order to fulfill that call. So that's more the slant that I'm taking. Is it cool? Yeah, okay, I had some other thought and it just gone. Yeah. All right. Let me then turn the page if I can. This has been just a tremendous change in our congregation. When I did this, as I said before, one of the first things I had was the superintendent of schools in our church. These are public schools, and he basically said, you know what, this is my calling. Superintendent's what I do, but my calling is to do this. So he started taking notes on Sunday morning and then typing the notes up and then sending them out to all of his principals and said, basically, these are your talking points on how to this or that, kind of thing. We had a principal in our school of a public high school who went back, and when he saw these, he said, you know what, this is what's lacking in the classroom. So he called all of his teachers into the cafeteria before the school year started, and he just said, this is what I want us to do. So these are the 4 things I'd like you. Your students are your sheep. So you're hired to teach, but you need to shepherd, because this is not just about content development, it's about character formation. And so I'd like you to come back with course outlines and show me how you're going to, maneuver your classes in order to allow for some of these disciplines. One guy owns 22 nursing homes, and he just decided he said, will you come and speak to my people? So I did. I got halfway into my speech, and the dude stands up and just goes, wait a second, Steve. Can I talk for a second? I was like, sure, it's your rodeo, man. So he looks at 300 CEOs, and he just goes, you see this thing right here? We don't do this. We do not know our people, and this has got to change. He just goes on a tirade right there, So when he's all done, he's like, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to create a big pot of money. We're going to put it over here, and whenever you know of some need in your nursing home, there's an issue that arises in a family or a crisis or a health care like that, you go to your administrator, and he will release the funds, and we'll take care of those kind of things. Now, you can't advertise it. You can't say we got money. You just have to create a culture that listens well, so that when needs arise, money's. That was a completely organizational change for him. We watched the thing just kind of blow up and take different forms as it went out. It was kind of fun. Now let me then, if I can, transfer to the next component of this. In the last maybe 10, 15 years, I've been kind of curious as to not how people lead, but how people follow. It seemed to me that of all the leadership stuff I was reading, they all started with a list of things, quality traits that good leaders should practice. But what they were overlooking was around every one of these leaders was a group of followers who for some reason had decided to follow that person. Why? That's the question. Because at the end of the day, the reason there's a leader is not because there's an organization. There's a leader because there's people. It's not because there's an office that we got to fill or there's a job that's got to be done. It's because people need to be organized and pointed in the same direction over this long period of time. Who can do that? And whoever that is becomes the leader. So if you start with why do people follow instead of how do people lead, then there's a fundamentally different set of things you start looking for. And from that, I noticed immediately that there were two economies of followership going on. One is an economy of authority, in which people follow because of the position that someone has. They believe that that leader has the best interest for the organization in his mind. And so they follow him because he's the coach and he knows how to make the whole team win. The other economy is one of trust. And these people follow because they believe the leader has their best interest in mind. That at the end of the day, he will leverage the organization to help the people instead of leveraging the people to help the organization. And when that trust component starts to rise, then that person gains authority, whoever the leader is. The real leader is the person who has established trust capital with people. So it sends me back to Jesus' words in John chapter 10, where he says in verse 3, the watchman opens the gate and the sheep listen to his voice. He calls his own sheep by name and he leads them out. And when he has brought them out, he goes on ahead of them and his sheep follow him because they know his voice. They will never follow a stranger. In fact, they'll run away because they do not recognize a stranger's voice. One more time. Leaders lead with their vision, and shepherds lead with their voice. It was totally different from what I was thinking. And yet it's liberating. Because when you lead with your voice, people follow you because they trust you. But when you lead with your vision, they follow you because they like where you're going. That's a totally different economy. Now, here's the beauty of it. When you lead with authority or with your position, then you are always leading with something that is external to you. It is outside of you. There is a Steve, and then there is a lead pastor office. So what that means is when Steve dies, the lead pastor office remains there. It's static. It has to be filled. The authority then can be transferred from Steve to the next person. Because the position or the followership is connected to something that is extrinsic to who I am. But when you lead with your voice, you're leading with something that only you have. So now, when I get hit by a bus, The next person can have my office, he can inherit the vision, but he can't have my voice. Because a voice is something that is developed between people on the currency of trust over a long period of time. And as I'm seeing it, that is the most persuasive form of leadership. It's people whose voice I have come to trust over a period of time. One of my shepherds emailed me yesterday. Every now and then he sits down and writes an epistle. And the email was titled, Next Steps for Steve DeNeff. Yeah, I didn't ask for this. I know, what? But he knew that I was tired. This is the third camp in a month. And he knew that I was getting sick. And he knew that I was speaking too much. And so he just said, here are the next steps. But he started out by saying, now you'll have to read this, and you'll have to decide whether this is Keith or whether this is God. It's your call completely. But this is what I see. But I'm telling you something, because I know him, it's already a 7 or an 8. If I didn't know him, I'd be thinking, what's this guy think he's Moses? So the fact that so what I'm hearing Jesus say is, sheep will hear a voice, and when they know that voice, then they will follow. Now, one more time, so we'll get this straight. Sheep do not follow everything they hear. They follow only what they know. Because sheep today with social media hear all kinds of voices, but they don't know all those voices. So they have a filtering process to decide who is worth following and who is not, to what degree, and they decide that on a quotient of knowing. So then the question becomes no longer, here's where it changes, do I know my sheep? Now the question becomes, do my sheep know me? So every one of these things now gets turned around. So the shepherd is always self-aware, asking themselves, how are the people perceiving me at the time? Because however they perceive me determines how well they think they know me and whether or not they'll follow me. And I mean, most of us we swear up and down that we have been misunderstood. I do it all the time. Jumped out of the car. I said, those guys, the board, I mean, if they only knew. And my son's he's in the car, and he goes, so you don't think they understand you? No. Because if they understood me, they would know that my heart is right, and they would do it. He said, but you realize, of course, because you're older than me, that you're probably not really who they say you are. I said, right. He said, and you're probably not really who you think you are. I say, what? He said, you're probably in reality somewhere between who you think you are and who they say you are. So far from trying to persuade them, Dad, maybe you should listen to them because they'll pull you closer to reality. I said, go to your room. Man, that is spot on, isn't it? So shepherds are always trying to stay self-aware as to how people are perceiving them. Man, when we discovered this, we split our board meeting up now. I don't chair our board because I'm awful at that too. And put the executive pastor now chairing the board meeting. And what I do every month is I go to the other end of the table and I just sit there and read faces while she leads the board. And then as soon as the board meeting is over, the first thing I do is go back into her office and I'll say, man, I think we were almost there on that issue, but Connie and Dale aren't there yet. Did you talk to them? No, I could see it on their faces. But what we noticed is you can't lead something and discern something at high levels at the same time. When you got 15 on your board, man, you're just paddling water, so you need someone else. What we're trying to do, though, is to discern the knowership. Is the board feeling that they know the heart and soul of the staff on this issue before we call for the vote? Because we want unity. So now the question is not, do I know them? The question is, do they know me? The question is no longer, am I feeding them? The question is, do they feel fed? If you're a preacher, of course you think you're interesting. Everything you say is gold, or you wouldn't say it. We have a saying around our house, around the church, they'll say, well, how did it go? And they'll ask now. They'll probably text, how did it go at Brown City? And I usually say, preaching's like kissing. You got to ask her. I mean, every guy thinks he's a good kisser. But she doesn't always think so. And so every preacher thinks they're interesting and good, but their congregation knows better. So the question is no longer, am I giving them good stuff? The question is, do they believe that I am adding value to their lives? The question is no longer, am I leading them? It's, are they following? And it's no longer, am I protecting them? It's, do they feel safe? My capacity to shepherd somebody is limited to how well they feel known, fed, led, and protected. So sheep decide who the shepherd is. They have ways of knowing who's worth following. Shepherds, by nature, always overestimate their gravitas. The second thing that I'm learning about this is the sheep decide this at their own pace. And I'm learning that they decide it largely by things that happen subconsciously. So if you ask a person, do you trust them? And they say yes. How much? And they say a lot. And then you say, why? There's almost always a pause. And it's almost as if people choose, it's like they fall into trusting. They don't ever formally say, well, it's time. They just sort of lean, and then they fall. And they do it through faculties that are largely almost primal. They're involuntary. And I'm learning that trust is never a yes-no issue. It's always plus minus. So I can't just say, do people trust me? Because if you add, I'll say, well, of course they do. Am I trustworthy? Well, of course I am. The question is, how much do people trust me? because, again, that determines their followership. So then, this is the last leg. What time is it? Holy cow. This is really, really fast, and then we'll just stop and take. Let me stop right now. Just take any feedback that you've got. I'm worried about the absorption rate. Go ahead, talk. Hands? Yeah.
I think it's brilliant for parenting, for one thing. But, since I've been listening to yesterday and today, it's brilliant for parenting. And I think schools, I think that's brilliant. I'd like to hear of course, ministry, but I'd like to hear some examples. Do you have like real life examples that would bring it a lot more home?
Of what?
Just practical examples of how you've seen this be used?
In people's lives
in
now?
any sphere, whether it's business, ministry, just kind of some real life stories of the model.
Yeah, some of them I was starting to lean in before. In the field of education, what I've seen is people that were once in administration decide to take on a handful of principals and just start to work with them, meeting with them outside of sessions, giving them better, cleaner access. I've seen teachers do this with students in the classroom. I've seen business leaders do the exact same thing. They have said, one that I'm just talking to now is trying to develop his leadership team. He's 65, and if he's not a billionaire, he's close. But he's starting to realize that legacy is an important thing. But he doesn't have a model for it. So what he's doing now is selecting people, a handful of people, and then is meeting with them offside and investing in them and answering questions. The shepherds in my life, what they did for me, I didn't find them. They found me. One of them was a professor, and I wrote a paper. And then the next thing I know, I got a voicemail that simply said, "This is good stuff. Write me something." I didn't even know the guy. And so I wrote something else, and I sent it to him. And then he sent me a 2.5-page letter back, single space, that basically said, "I've been looking for people that I want to see rise, and you're one of them. Where can I meet you?" Now, the guy's 20 years older than me, and he's at headquarters at that point. And I'm in North Lakeport Church. So that's population 3,000. That is like end of the world, hang a left. And I read the letter twice, and I drove to Coldwater, Michigan, and sat there for 2 hours. And he said, "Tell me anything you need and I'll get it." I said, "I don't even know what to ask for. What don't you know that you wish you knew?" I said, "The church fathers. I can't get anything from the church fathers." This was just before the internet made all that available. He said, "You'll have them in a week. What else do you need? Do you want to come and work with me at headquarters?" I said, no. But you can see the tactic there. Then I got a letter from him that said, "I'm going to meet with 4 guys, and we're going to meet down in South Indiana, Brown County, for 4 days. We're going to do a prayer and fasting retreat, and just, do you want to come?" I said, "Yeah, sure." It's that. Little by little, what he was doing was he was giving me opportunities to step into his gravity. See it? And then what followed, of course, then for the last 20 years, has been emails. So he's in my church. Every Sunday, I get an email from him called "At the Door Comments." Every Sunday. And it's never, "This is what you should do, not do." Now he's changed. I actually get live feed of his comments while I'm preaching. Wow. He does. He sits back there. "Oh, that was a solid point right there. No, don't go. No, hold it. Oh, yeah. All right, good night," that kind of thing, And then when the sermon's over, he just hits send. I'm like, holy cow. Keith Drury. You know Drury. You're thinking this is Drury. There's only one Drury, But the dude is a genius. Best I've ever seen when it comes to this kind of stuff. Other students will tell you the same thing. He picks them, and he does the same thing. He'll throw something a little bit out there, and then he'll say, how can I help you? And some students will just go, hey, no, I think I'm good. And if they do, then he just goes, yeah, great, I'll just cheer for you. But if they don't, if they just do what I did, which was kind of like, I'm not even smart enough to know how you can help me. What should I say right now, And then that's when he breaks it down. Well, what don't you know that you wish you knew that I could get you? And what are there deficiencies in your past? Tell me about your church. What are you trying to do right now? That kind of thing. And he just kind of pulls it out of you. And then he starts unloading from his cachet of experience and things. Is that what you're looking for? Does that help?
It does. It does.
I'm not.
Yeah. No, the concepts and the model is not confusing to me at all.
Yeah,
I totally
sure,
get it.
sure.
Like I'm totally following you, and I think it's brilliant. I think it's great. I'd love to see it everywhere, completely. There's a lot of. I could go a lot of different directions, but I won't do that to you.
Yeah, I think the important
questions.
I think the important highlight is that this is not curriculum led. This is the person pulls this out of you. Life is the curriculum, not some book or some TED talk.
Yes.
Okay?
Yeah.
Then you become a resource, but at the same time, every time you resource them, you're looking for more than they gave you before. You're pushing. One last example might help you. I talked to one of our staff, and I said, how have you grown in the last year? She said, in the last year, the most powerful thing that's happened to me is my supervisor. It wasn't me. And she said, this person has just opened my world. Then I said, what did they do for you? And she said, well, there was a few things. First of all, they called me into doing something that was more than I thought I could do. So that's the first rule of thumb. That's the lead thing. They pushed me beyond my comfort level. They saw a capacity they did not have. Second thing that they did, by the way, the thing that they gave me to do, I could have failed at, and it was essential to the mission of the organization. They weren't just saying, go out and hand out bulletins. They were saying, if you don't do this, something critical at College Church begins to fall apart. You got to do that part really. So it was mission critical. They met with them and said, then the second thing is they resourced them. They simply said, in order for you to do this, you have to know things that you do not know. You have to know people that you haven't met yet. So I'm going to introduce you and connect you guys, and I want you to meet. And then when I talk to you next week, tell me what happened in your life. It's that kind of a thing. See what I mean? So there's some structure to it, but it's not static or
kind of ebb and flow with the person, situation, the season.
Perfect.
Whatever.
Yep. Perfect words. Other comments?
You finally showed me how I taught all my life. From back when I first taught swimming lessons, I knew my kids, they were young, and they didn't like the water. So I fed them that it's okay to put your face in the water. And I let them to do that, and I was willing to protect them that you won't drown if you put your face in the water. And that's primarily how I taught all the grades, different grades I taught, especially the preschoolers that I taught. Yeah. You're safe here. I'm going to feed you some stuff, and I'm going to lead you to how to do that.
Yeah.
And that just, it just clicked here.
Wow. Wow. Let me give you, we got about 6, 5, 4, actually 3 minutes. Let me give you where we'll take off for tomorrow. The question then becomes, how do we establish a high trust quotient? And from what I'm able to read and observe, and from the bruises that I've gotten, I've found that it's probably connected to 3 things, which are more of a Venn diagram than they are just a bullet point. So I put them in a format like this. And what I'm saying is ultimate trust. The trust is the highest when the center of these 3 qualities intersect. That's what trust is. Question has been, what becomes these 3? I'll just list them to you and we'll start there tomorrow, okay? The first one is your agenda. Sheep can smell your agenda. And they're always wondering what your agenda is. Second is your character. Are you worth following? Do you have game, morally speaking? And then the third is your level of commitment to them. If you're my leader, are you here for me or am I here for you? And don't say both, because that means I'm here for you. So they're always trying to discern this, and when they do, the degree to which your agenda is pure in their eyes, your character is morally strong, and your commitment level is high, when those three intersect, trust level starts to rise over time. All right? Let me pray, and I'll let you go. Well, Father, we did not intend to be here at this time, did we? Not this morning. Nevertheless, this is the place where we have stopped, and so what I'm praying for right now is just maximum adhesion, a sticky factor for all of this stuff. I pray that we would all go out, we all with our situations specific to our calling, we would just go out with this in our hearts right now and just go, man, Lord, help me. And meet with us, God. Meet with us in 100 different places, different times. Speak to us in the next few hours. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you, guys. Thanks for coming in today.